Medicare is complicated. Medicare can be confusing. Medicare is no fun to study. Will you know what decisions to make when Medicare time arrives for you? My name is Doug Jones, and I wrote a book to help you figure it all out. Medicare for the Lazy Man. It's on sale at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Also, you can download and listen to my podcast, Medicare for the Lazy Man, wherever fine podcasts are given away free of charge. Medicare for the Lazy Man, simplest and easiest guide ever.
Forging ahead, chapped lips and all, it's the Medicare for the Lazy Man podcast. A rollicking good bit of Medicare fun. Trying to cram 10 pounds of Medicare into a 5-pound bag, it's Medicare expert Doug Jones.
Well, guess what? It's going to be another episode of the Medicare for the Lazy Man podcast. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. But before that episode begins, we have to talk a little bit about why we're here. We're here so that I can flog my book and perhaps attract some new insurance clients. Yes, that's right. I'm here for crass business acumen. No, I'm the business acumen for crass financial gain. That's what I want to do. I want to help people and thereby help myself. I want to sell books and attract clientele to my insurance sales practice and help them get through Medicare. Here's how it works. You go to BarnesandNoble.com or Amazon.com and purchase one of my very, very nicely priced books that describe the whole Medicare process. Now, you can have a paperback book that costs $8. You can have a Kindle ebook that costs $3.80. You can have an Audible book that costs, I think, in the neighborhood of $6. Or you can buy the magnificent hardbound, hardcover Medicare for the Lazy Man 2023 at $22. The book is always going to have the title Medicare for the Lazy Man. The most recent edition, which is the one that you want, is 2023. It's got those orange numbers on the cover. And once you read that book, you will have acquired more knowledge than most other people in the United States have about Medicare. At that point, you're going to start thinking about your encounter with Medicare. And when it's time, when it's just a few months ahead of the time that you want to retire, or that you are turning 65, or that your spouse that has you on their insurance plan is going to retire, all you have to do is send me an email and ask me to help you acquire the insurance that you need to make Medicare a better element of protection against medical bills. And when Medicare has been improved, both the purchase of some fairly moderately priced additional insurance products, you're going to be done with Medicare for the rest of your life. As far as I can tell, Congress doesn't have the moxie to screw it up. So I'm thinking that once you follow my recommendations and acquire the insurance that I recommend, in addition to Medicare Parts A and B, you're going to be sitting on the catbird seat for the rest of your life. And I hope it's a long and happy life. Randy Carson is staring at me. He's thinking up clever things to say, I hope, and I'm going to ask him about those things. But the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the 5-minute timer. Remember our cube, Randy? I'm going
You mean the one I can't hear?
Yes, exactly right. You said there might be a special filter, a noise filter on our microphone, our program.
I think your background filter in your mic is cutting it out.
Well, I'm going to set this thing for 5 minutes. That's all the goofing around time I'm going to allow us for today. And let's see if you can hear it when it goes off.
Okay.
Just like sometimes I can hear those crickets when they tell us at the end of the episode is happening. And other times you get to them and strangle them before they can make any noise.
Well, I try to always catch them before they go, but I think occasionally Occasionally, it adds a little bit of ambiance to the podcast, but maybe
And
not.
well, the problem is that it warns the audience that they should have left the room instead of listening to us jaw jack all afternoon.
That we're dribbling on more than we should have. That's what they
Yes,
know.
absolutely. It's a signal that we have maybe mismanaged our time, our allotted time. We always shoot for 20 minutes per episode, and if we don't go too far over 30 minutes, we're not too upset about it. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Well, it's like bringing your airplane in for a landing. You can't do it any faster than you can do it.
No, in fact, you're not on my email list. You have enough distractions, and frankly, I don't want to cause you any more any problems or anything else. But I got an email, and I passed it on to my list of about 25 people. It was the unintentional landing of the day. It was a guy flying a light plane, and he landed on a kind of a busy interstate. It was a 3-lane wide freeway, and the cars all kind of saw him coming. And wow, what the heck is this? The guy's landing his airplane on my road, and they all moved over, and he landed right in the middle of the road. Wingspan took up the other 2 lanes on either side of him, and then he managed to pull off the road. So he had one wing off of it was on the wheels of the plane were on the shoulder, and one wing was hanging way off the road. The other was still blocking a lane. So I was waiting for or a truck to come along and smack that thing, turn it into a whirly gig. The guy got out of the airplane, and there was a guy in a car who got out and was filming him with his phone, videoing his reason. What was your reason for? I had to go to the bathroom, and the guy runs into the ditch. Whips it out.
Oh my God, you got to be kidding me.
Now, sometimes I think you and I have poor planning with these episodes. Why do we run over? Why can't I make the content match the time that we've agreed that we think is ideal? And that's poor planning. This guy had really poor planning.
Exactly. Well, you know something? I haven't done this for a while, but I think it's about time that we play a little game of Stump the Medicare insurance expert.
Well, according to my cube, we've got plenty of time. We've got 1 minute and 53.21 seconds. Go.
Well, you're probably going to know this one because you're really very good at this kind of stuff. So wind your mind back to 1966 today.
Oh, one of my favorite years.
Today in 1966, I want you to take a shot at what happened that day, today in 1966.
Well, if you've been snooping around in my scrapbook bag or my scrapbook box, you might have discovered that that's the day I graduated from high school, except I think it was really just a few weeks later, because I think we actually had our graduation ceremony in June. I'm not 100% sure about that. So, okay, we're talking something more important than my scholastic achievements.
There's nothing more important than that, but this is also important.
Okay. Would this have been the Gulf of Tonkin resolution? Well, it might have been 66. I know that the Yadrang Valley took place in 65. That was a pitched battle where the Americans dropped a bunch, like 400 soldiers into the Yadrang Valley from helicopters, one of the first air mobile operations. And they encountered, instead of the VC that they thought they were going to encounter, they encountered the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, or the PAVN, the People's Army of Vietnam, or whatever. And instead of the VC taking a couple of licks and running away, as they expected, they landed right on a regimental headquarters of NVA, and that was a pitched battle that lasted about 4 days. You hear anything interesting?
No, I didn't.
It's beeping like a storm. Beeping up a storm. God,
I can't hear it.
This thing is useless. Okay, go ahead. So,
all right. Well,
judging by the look on your face, it wasn't the Tonkin Gulf.
No, I mean, what you said was really important and really interesting, but I'm going to have to give you a
A
buzzer on
zero.
that one.
All right.
Ah.
Okay, I don't know. I was more interested in the ladies at St. Charles High School back then than I was in most current events. So you're going to have to help me out.
Well, I'm sure, given that as soon as I tell you what this is, I'm sure that it's going to ring a bell.
Was it the
And
first day that Tommy James Hanky Panky was played?
no, no,
No.
no.
Okay. Sorry.
Mm-mm. All right, so let's go ahead and identify what it is. Would you like me to give you some hints?
Well, give me one hint. Let's not waste the audience's day, but give me one hint. Let's see if I can pick it up.
All right, I'll give you one heck of a hint.
All right.
Pet sounds.
Oh, Beach Boys. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Love the Beach Boys. Didn't like Pet Sounds or anything newer than that for the most part.
Well,
I
this was
loved
the
their old
day
stuff.
in 1966 that they released what they considered to be their masterwork, Pet Sounds. Now,
Yeah,
why did they consider it their masterwork?
because well, frankly, I don't know, but they weren't satisfied with that. At least Brian Wilson was not, because he was driven insane by the success the Beatles had. He hated the British invasion because they ate into the Beach Boys market. There were a lot of kids. And I remember I came to Arizona, visited my grandparents. They said, we want you to meet the daughter of our friend. Oh, this beautiful girl. I think she's a medical doctor now. But she and I walked around the really nice neighborhood in Phoenix along Central Avenue where her parents lived and my grandparents were visiting. And she and I did nothing but argue about who was better, the Beatles or the Beach Boys. And then later, as I got older, I learned that Brian Wilson was severely depressed because the Beatles had so much success in America, and he couldn't think of anything that he could write that would compete with them. And so I believe I can't remember whether it became, Pet Sounds was his hope that would be a British invasion squasher, but then they went on to do something else, Smiley Smile or something, and they just never really topped the Beatles, although they're dearly beloved. And I like their older stuff. I like the stuff that they did in the early '60s.
Yeah.
The Girls, Cars, and Surf. That's what I was
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it.
Oh, and
Well,
Brian Wilson was a neighbor of mine in St. Charles, Illinois for quite some time.
oh yeah.
He had a record producer that operated in the Chicago suburbs. And so the record producer's wife and Brian Wilson's wife at the time, who was, I think she's still married to him, she was a Cadillac sales lady. That's how he met her. He went to a dealership to buy a Cadillac, and they wound up getting married. But she wanted to manipulate everything about Brian's career. And so Brian and she and the record producer bought big houses in St. Charles, Illinois, right next door to each other. And I think they had a tunnel. I don't know if they were kidding about this because they were friends with with Steve Dahl, a radio guy that I listened to religiously. But the record producer and Brian had a studio in the basement of one of their houses and did some recording and everything else. But Brian was, not recovered from his mental problems at that time. And I don't think they did anything that was really worthwhile. And I remember that during that period of time, this maybe 15, 20 years ago or more than that, probably, the Brian Wilson appeared on David Letterman. And I watched that performance, and he sat in the middle, surrounded by David Letterman's band, led by Paul Schaefer. And they were playing Beach Boy songs coming into and going out of commercial breaks. And Brian Wilson just sat there staring. He'd never touched the keyboard that they put him in front of, and he never sang like I think they thought he would. He just sat there staring into space in the middle of the David Letterman band. And I will tell you that my daughter had a friend who was pregnant, so she quit her job, but she wanted to do something, and so she volunteered as the Wilsons' cleaning lady, light cleaning and dusting in the house. And she said that she would walk by Brian Wilson's bedroom and just look at the guy laying in bed staring at the ceiling. He was comatose most of the time. So that's
Wow.
what I remember from, hearing about Brian Wilson's activities back then in the 1990s, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great story. I love those kind of things. So I'm glad I picked out, the Beach Boys today.
Yeah.
1966. Pet
You can't.
Pet Sounds, right? Okay.
Pet Sounds is what you told me that they released
Yep.
this day in '66, and it was
Yeah.
not my favorite. I like the stuff that they did before Pet Sounds, but Brian Wilson's father was just a nasty uh, jerk. And I think he caused a lot of the depression that Brian suffered from later on. There are recordings of him trying to operate the Beach Boys machine during recording sessions. Instead of letting these gifted musicians decide for themselves what their stuff was going to sound like, he forced them to do this and that and everything. It was not an ideal familial relationship. So,
No, not at all.
yeah,
Not at all.
Dennis was a big drunk and died diving into a harbor for furniture that he had thrown off his yacht in a temper tantrum. And Carl, I guess we could say this for any smoker, but Carl died of lung cancer. He couldn't get his poop together to quit smoking. And there was just Mike Love was a cousin of the family, and he's always been wound a little tight. I think people have trouble getting along with him. So the Beach Boys was not a happy story. Yet I guess it's been happier lately when they've had a bunch of non-Beach Boys musicians and they go to all the county fairs and state fairs and make a ton of money, and everybody loves them. So, God bless them for creating a culture that we always pictured was California, because California is not that anymore.
Anytime you hear any of their work, it just brings you right back to California, Southern California.
Oh, yeah. Hey, guess what? We've been jaw-jacking even more. That's stupid.
We need to get we're the 75 cents is running short here, Doug.
That stupid cube that told me it was going to beep at 5 minutes.
If it wasn't for the cube, we would have moved on. But the cube I'm telling you, send the cube back. We can't hear it.
Well, here's the cube is going right back where it came from. I got an exciting announcement that's going to change everything about our podcast. And I didn't even announce this to you, Randy, but I have a new assistant who is in charge now of all podcast episode content. And right now, I can't tell you who she is because she's on probationary, like a trial period as a new employee. But if it works out well, then you're going to have content that's even, and I hate to use this word because it's so trendy, but it's curated, especially for our audience. So how do you like that? We're going to have content that is so interesting, so meaningful, and so elucidating about Medicare and the things surrounding Medicare, and in a wider picture, the things surrounding being a little on the older side in America, that the audience will be rapt. They'll be held in thrall of our episodes. So let me launch into my newest content as curated by my episode content assistant.
Cool.
And so the first article that she has curated for us is entitled Understanding the Donut Hole. Now, this is about Medicare prescription drug plans, PDPs, and the donut hole is something that people have been taught to be deathly afraid of. It's a period in which, as they're going through the year, buying their drugs, refilling their prescriptions, when they're led to believe that the coverage provided under their Medicare Part D prescription drug plan stops, and they have to pay for all the drugs themselves. And it really, I've had clients that didn't even take drugs, that were scared of the donut hole. Now that tells me there's been a PR job from hell worked on the American public. And so this article says Understanding the Donut Hole, and it's a letter to an expert, not me. I'm not the expert. From Sarah, who lives in Kansas City, Missouri. I was told I will likely reach the donut hole by July, and my prescription copays will change every month, but I'm still confused. Can you explain how the donut hole works? And so whoever's answering this question says, hello, Sarah. Drug costs can fluctuate throughout the year due to factors such as the retail cost of your drugs, which coverage phase you are in. Since you know, you will reach the coverage gap or donut hole. Coverage gap is equivalent or synonymous with donut hole. This is an indicator that your drug costs are high. Let's take a look at how you will move through the different phases of coverage. Now, this applies to all Part D prescription drug plans. If your plan has a deductible, now it says if your plan has a deductible, the federal government has said that every plan is allowed to have a deductible, but not all plans do. And the federal government also says if you want to have a deductible, it cannot exceed, and I think right now the limit is $505 for the year. And also that deductible does not have to apply to every drug in the plan's formulary. But I just wanted to elucidate or explain the nature of this answer. So number one, if your plan has a deductible, you will first pay the retail cost of your prescriptions until you have met the total deductible amount. Once you have met the deductible, you and your plan will share the cost of drugs in your initial coverage phase. This means you will have set copays and coinsurances for different tiered drugs. So there are a million drugs out there. Each drug plan has a formulary in which they include some, but not all of the available drugs. And I believe the rule is that CMS dictates that each drug plan has to have 2 drugs in a particular treatment category, but they don't have to have all drugs that are available. And so they arrange these drugs in layers or tiers. The lower tiers, tier number 1 and maybe tier number 2, primarily are generic drugs. Tier number 3, tier number 4 are more expensive name brand drugs. And then tier number 5 is like experimental drugs and really hugely expensive stuff that people almost never really encounter. So anyway, I was reading this article. We have numbered paragraphs. So number 2, once you have met the deductible and you and your plan will share the cost of your drugs in the initial coverage phase. This means you will have set copays and coinsurances for different tiered drugs. For example, tier 1 drugs, probably a $0 copay. Tier 2 drugs, $15 copay when you fill a prescription. Tier 3 drugs, maybe a $45 copay. During this phase, if you and the plan pay more than $4,660 in drugs, that's you and the plan together. If you've paid more than $4,660, you will move to the next phase of coverage called the coverage gap or donut hole. In the coverage gap, this is number 3. In the coverage gap, your responsibility changes to 25% of the cost of your drugs. Previously, you paid a fraction of the cost. Now you will be paying a bigger chunk. For example, let's say your tier 3 drug that you used to pay $45 for has a market cost of $1,000. While in the coverage gap, you will now pay 25% of the cost of that drug, which is $250. This is why many people are caught off guard when they reach the coverage gap. Number 4, you will continue to pay 25% of the cost of your drugs until you have paid $7,400 out of pocket. Now, these numbers change every year. And they normally go up, I got to tell you. So from $4,660 to $7,400, you'll be in the donut hole or the coverage gap. You'll be paying 25% of the retail cost out of your pocket. Once you hit that $7,400, you will be entering the last phase of coverage called catastrophic coverage. In that phase, you only pay a small coinsurance percentage or copayment for covered drugs for the rest of the year. As you can see, your drug costs will take some twists and turns. Unfortunately, determining when you reach the coverage gap depends on the cost of your drugs rather than your drug plan itself. Many people ask for a plan that does not have a coverage gap, but no such plan exists in the Medicare market. Even if you purchased the highest premium plan, you would still eventually reach the coverage gap if you take high-cost drugs. So, hope that explained the coverage gap and when you hit it and how you get out of it and what happens after that. So I feel as though we had so little content that I'm going to forge ahead and try to make people feel that they really didn't waste their time by tuning in this episode. So let's go on to the next curated subject that we have for this episode of the Medicare for the Lazy Man podcast, as curated by my new assistant. And the title of this article is What You Need to Know When Traveling. So if you've got Medicare and you're traveling, there are some things, some considerations to keep in the back of your mind. When it comes to traveling, knowing how your Medicare coverage works is important to know. All right, I might not have used the word know twice in the same sentence. Whether you're taking a trip domestically or abroad, your coverage may work differently depending on where you are in the world. Watch the video below. Oops. I'm going to have my assistant curate stuff like that right out of the content. Don't watch the video below, but if there were a video below, I would ask you to watch it to learn what your Medicare plan will cover while you travel. Whether you're taking a trip domestically or abroad, your Medicare coverage may work differently depending on your location. So when it comes to traveling, it's wise to know how your coverage will work wherever you may be. Let's go over Medicare plans and how they work when traveling. Let's start with Original Medicare. That's Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B. They provide coverage in all 50 states, as well as the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. Health care that you receive in foreign countries is not covered, and Medicare does not cover medical services on a cruise ship if the ship is more than 6 hours away from a U.S. port. And ships don't move very fast, so I'm guessing that most cruise ships spend most of their time more than 6 hours outside of a U.S. port. However, Original Medicare may pay for inpatient hospital, doctor, ambulance services, or dialysis if you get in a foreign country in some rare cases. So here are the three rare cases they list. If you're in the U.S. when a medical emergency occurs that requires immediate medical attention to prevent a disability or death, and the foreign hospital is closer than the nearest U.S. hospital, then that's one way that you can have Medicare pay your bills incurred in a foreign hospital. Number two, you're traveling through Canada without unreasonable delay by the most direct route between Alaska and another state when a medical emergency occurs and the Canadian hospital is closer than the nearest U.S. hospital that can treat the emergency. And the third one is when you live in the U.S. and the foreign hospital is closer to your home than the nearest U.S. hospital that can treat your medical condition, regardless of whether an emergency exists. So even if it's not an emergency and you're just hanging out in your shack, but the nearest foreign hospital is closer than the nearest U.S. hospital, you may use that and have Medicare pay your bills. Medicare Advantage plans. Now, that was Original Medicare. Now, if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, which I never recommend and I will not sell you, they operate off of a network like an HMO or a PPO, and they typically restrict where you may receive coverage throughout the United States. This is one of the negative aspects of Medicare Advantage plans, one of the many negative aspects. Unless it is an emergency or urgent situation, a provider may deny care or charge a higher copay. Some Advantage plans offer travel coverage that allows you to see providers throughout the U.S. if they participate in the carrier's network. In addition, you will have a limited coverage near the U.S. border and out of the country. Now, let's suppose that you're smart enough to have purchased a Medicare supplement plan. Maybe you've purchased it from yours truly. The other name for those plans is Medigap. So Medicare supplement, Medigap, synonymous names. They can be used anywhere throughout the U.S. if the provider accepts Original Medicare as a reimbursement vehicle. However, they provide limited coverage abroad. The foreign travel emergency benefit of Medigap insurance and all of the plans that I sell contain this foreign travel clause in them. The foreign travel emergency benefit of Medigap insurance applies only during the first 60 days of travel and will cover 80% of emergency health care outside the country with a $250 deductible to be satisfied first. There is a lifetime limit of $50,000 for foreign travel emergencies, also with a Medigap plan. Now, prescription drug plans, how do they work when you're traveling? They do not cover prescription drugs that you buy outside of the U.S. You may be able to fill your prescriptions when traveling inside the U.S. by contacting your plan and searching for an in-network pharmacy in the area in which you're traveling. So to sum it up, there are certain circumstances in which Medicare will cover you when traveling. However, there may also be restrictions on how your coverage will work. If you're traveling soon and are concerned about needing Medicare, be sure to check what your plan offers for emergencies that may occur outside the U.S. All right. We actually hit on 2 subjects today, so I feel less disturbed than I did a few minutes ago when we had only done one little article. So, Randy, I'd say let's wrap it up and send everybody home. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. I do have one quick question, if
Yes,
it can be answered this time around. Otherwise, I'll save it for later. But the one thing I've always been confused about in the donut hole is, does everybody hit the donut hole?
No, the donut hole is triggered when you've spent out of your pocket. You and the plan together have spent $4,660 this year in drug costs, retail drug costs. So let's say that you take some kind of drug that's pretty darn expensive, and your plan says you got to pay a pittance for that drug during the early stages of your plan. When you and the plan together have spent $4,660, all of a sudden you're in the donut hole magically.
So let's say, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and you're going to stay there until the next threshold, which is $7,600, and then magically you pass through the donut hole.
So it's possible to hit the donut hole year after year after year.
There are people who hit it in January at the beginning of the year because the drugs they take are so outrageously expensive that the donut hole hits them. It opens up for them sooner, and then they pass through the donut hole fairly quickly. Other people may hit the donut hole in late fall or maybe just not ever hit it at all. I take a bunch of different drugs that are all generics and no big deal, and I've never hit the donut hole. I have never ever spent more than a $500 or $1,000 total for the year.
So then maybe you can clear up one more little foggy spot in my head. I read
you're going to need medical, expertise that I can't provide for that.
So I read articles on the internet. Okay, maybe I'm just misinterpreting the title, but how to avoid the donut hole. Is that possible?
Well, it's not possible if you take drugs that your doctor says are the ones you need and they happen to be expensive. I suppose you could say, well, I can avoid the donut hole by getting only generics, even though my doctor wants me to take name brands. Generics typically would be cheaper. It would take longer for you to spend enough money to wind up in the donut hole. But frankly, I don't think the donut hole is that scary. At the beginning of the episode, I said that I've had clients that don't even take drugs, and they're scared to death of the donut hole. When I show them, okay, you don't take any drugs, here is the cheapest drug plan for you. Buy this drug plan, which preserves your right to buy a drug plan in the future that's more attuned to your new drug needs if you have to start taking drugs, but you won't have a late enrollment penalty. And then they go, okay, but I want to spend more money and get a more expensive drug plan because I don't want to get near the donut hole. Well, there's no reason to be afraid of the donut hole, even if you take drugs that will put you in the donut hole. You're still only paying 25% of the retail cost of that drug. So you're not totally without insurance. There's 75% of the cost is being paid for you by the plan.
Okay, now that makes sense. Thanks for that explanation. I've
Sure.
just always been very confused about, well, not only what the donut hole is, but who got in the donut hole and how they got there. So,
and why isn't it tasty? Why doesn't it taste good?
Whenever you talk about the donut hole, you know what I think of?
Well, I'm sure you're thinking of you're salivating, right?
The Dunkin' Donut hole. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so we need to get out of here because the 75-cent meter, it was gone. Okay,
We're gonna have to start paying a little bit more for the time if we're gonna jaw jack all day like we have been.
Yeah, well, I understand the value of this information, and I really appreciate you taking time to cover it because I've always been confused about it. And I don't see any reason to be confused because you're the expert and I'm not.
Well, there's no reason not to do this every once in a while. Again, we can address this anytime you want to.
Sounds good. Well, everybody in the audience, we certainly thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the podcast today, focusing on the Dunkin' Donut hole and how to stay in it, how to get out of it, and what causes it. So anyway, we really appreciate you joining us today, because without you, it's not nearly as much fun. Just remember that Doug Jones is a nationwide licensed agent, ready, willing, and able, with his finger on the mouse, to help you through your Medicare supplement planning. And you can reach him at dbj@mlmmailbag.com. You can check us out at medicareforthelazyman.com. And as you know, there's a variety of different forms that his book comes in, Medicare for the Lazy Man 2023. And if you can find a way to give us a rating, we would certainly appreciate it, because we're up against it on the rating wars, just like everybody else. But so today, I don't know if you were counting on your clock. I couldn't hear ours, but in the ultimate, you have just spent about 32 and a half minutes with Doug Jones, the insurance guy from originally Oklahoma, but
Yes.
now living in Cave Creek, Arizona, up in the high altitudes behind the city. And I'm going to clock him in. Oh, okay. He doesn't have his oxygen mask on today, so I'm going to clock him in at about 8,700 feet.
Thank you, Randy. It's beautiful up here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and we'll see you real soon.